Welcome to the Phoenix Path podcast. I'm your host, Maddie B. I am honored today to bring you Hegi-Miller. Mill is a good friend, and I've known Mill for about 2 years now. It's amazing what you find out, over the years as we've become friends. But Mill grew up in an alcoholic home and has come through the effects of that, coupled with the journey of discovering their true identity, now walking authentically, mind, body, and spirit. Through it all, they found love and healing and support through working a 12-step program and finding the love of their life, Amber. Miller's found success as a leader in the life science industry, making a difference there, and has just celebrated the safe arrival of their first grandbaby. Mill, welcome.
Thank you, Manny. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, and it's been a road. I know we obviously met through, obviously to us, not the listeners, but we met through work. And I know when we first connected, it was immediately like old friends.
Correct. I mean, it was like kinship. It seemed like we both were willing to be vulnerable immediately. We just kind of sensed on the other person that they've been through something and that we had a shared path. Even though their journeys weren't the same, they were a shared path of, growth and development that we experienced through adversity.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, you can feel that with somebody pretty immediately. And it's not always the length of time you've known somebody, but just, it can be like, old friends from the beginning. So I'm so excited to bring you here to the listeners. And you've got, a story to tell. Your journey, obviously, growing up in an alcoholic home, and then whilst the journey of really becoming and finding your authenticity at the same time, it's a journey and a half, and you truly are, somebody that has risen through the ashes, risen from the ashes. So I will let you do a little introduction just of yourself, and then we'll dig in.
Sure. You alluded to the fact that I grew up with parents who were alcoholics. And so there's a difference in alcoholism, right? Like growing up as a child, though, you don't realize that your family's different. You just know it doesn't, there's things that are a little off. It doesn't seem the same. But you grow and adapt and you adjust in those situations. But with my family, my mother became an alcoholic, I believe, truly because based on circumstances. There was some violence in the family, mostly directed towards her. The physical violence, the emotional violence was with everybody. My father he was truly an alcoholic when it comes to when you talk about addiction, to be able to fight that, the gene that you have. And his life was a struggle because of that. I know that. But because of the circumstances, my mother then trying to escape became an alcoholic too. The good news about my mother was that she was able to get herself sober. She did it all on her own. She didn't do any 12-step program. Now, a lot of that had to do with the influence of the relationship I had with her. I know that doesn't always work, but we all know that if we don't hold people accountable, they're probably not going to make the tough choice to become sober because it's tougher to be sober, right?
Absolutely.
To maintain that. So it was around 9/11. She was getting surgery and the doctor asked her about drinking. And I just rolled my eyes at the appointment and she saw it. She sensed it and she just felt a sense of guilt and felt bad that she had disappointed me so much. And then come 9/11, I think she just had some reality check come in, with life is fragile. And she just decided to quit drinking. And she shared stories with me. She would show up at the beer distributor ready to go in and buy it, but she just stayed in her car. There was times that she put it in her trunk and never drank it, but that shows you the strength of the character that she had to overcome that. And I believe that's where I got a lot of, my strength of character was through the adversity that they struggled and taught me that you never give up. Unfortunately, my father, he was arrested several times from DUI. He was a known entity to the police, unfortunately. So they would sit and wait for him. But through it all, we had been separated for about 9 years. I chose to not talk to him. Throughout those 9 years, my son was born, and I did not have a choice to not go through the abuse that I suffered, but my son had that choice if I made that choice for him. So I decided not to do that. And when my father was diagnosed with cancer, he reached out to my brother. And during that time, he just said, I know that I would say sister at the time, sibling, has not been talking to me, but if Mill wants to reunite, I'm open. So the last 3 weeks of his life, nobody deserves to die alone, is how I felt. I spent the last 3 weeks with him. I realized and acknowledged that the choice I made was really good because he hadn't changed. But I also got to see him from a different perspective. If you ever want to truly know about a relationship with somebody and what they've taught you, if it's been a negative one, try writing an obituary or try writing, an obituary to give at a funeral, right? I was asked to provide that. What it makes you do is it makes you look back of all the good qualities that they did teach you, because not every relationship is all negative, right? There's that positive in there. And so I had a sense of peace coming out of that after he passed away, and I was okay. Because I saw how many people he was surrounded by that really loved him. So yeah,
That's
that's, I mean, my
powerful.
story pretty much with the alcoholism, and then how that traumatically impacts the children growing up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories behind that of the trauma that it imposes on somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. What strength and grace to be able to go and spend that time with him, and the gifts obviously that you had from that experience. And um it's incredible going back to growing up in that house. How did we all have those kind of maladaptive ways of coping because we don't know any better, we haven't got the tools yet, we're children. How did you cope? How did you cope? What ways did you find to get through those times?
So, one thing I've learned over the years when I did some mental health counseling in a residential treatment facility with individuals, the one thing that strings through success stories, if you will, for people that have survived trauma and past experiences like that is maintaining a sense of support somewhere, somebody who provided that unconditional love. And I was very fortunate to grow up next to, our house was built right next to my grandparents' house. It was my mom's parents. And, my household didn't rise very early. They were out drinking the night before, so nobody was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I would get up and I would go next door to my grandparents and we would just share, morning breakfast together and talk. My grandfather was always there. My grandmother worked during those times, but my grandfather came to all my sporting events and supported me. Um, with that comes, I think people view that they have to give you all this positive, and so they never really had any negative things to say about me as grandparents. But then you grow up with this sense of, wait, am I really that good? You don't know where you land in there then, because you have the emotional trauma of being torn apart, if you will. I call it that, like emotionally. So you don't understand, like, what am I? Am I like this side of the line or this side? Am I like all good? Or so you have to find out what your identity is after that. Like, and it's really hard to kind of figure that out. It's a interwoven puzzle of things to reveal for sure.
Mm. And so your grandparents really were, and your grandma especially, your guardian angel, you know.
Yes.
They do pop up, don't they? They are
Yes.
there. People find them in all sorts of different ways. So, throughout school and getting into your teenage years, I know we've talked a little bit about that in the past. And I know at that point you were kind of discovering your sexuality and exploring that. And so, what did that look like for you, especially going, as you just said, going through that emotionally, am I all this or am I all that? And
Mhm.
then having all those feelings mixed in there, how did that look? And how did you start to that kind of journey? And I'll say, that takes a lot of courage because when you and I were at school, that was not something that was as out.
Mhm.
Um, so incredible courage, first of all. And what did that look like for you?
So it's funny, I guess there's irony in this because a lot of people do struggle coming out with their sexuality. the reality for me is I don't think I struggled. It was just me. And I've always been authentic to who I am. So the reception by other people has always been very positive for me because I am not going to change. I've always had the philosophy that in this reality, I'm not going to change. When I'm convinced 100% this is authentically who I am, I don't change for anybody. And I think it shows because though it was a dysfunctional, if you will, I ended up in a relationship with my basketball coach at the time. I was 15. I would say that I came out at 15 because that's when I acted on those thoughts that I already had. I mean, I remember thinking like being attracted to girls when I was like, those little, when you're a
Yeah.
first grader,
Yeah.
like it wasn't the boys I really wanted to hang out
Yeah.
with, the
Yeah.
girl. So I just kind of always felt that was a part of me, my sexuality, like being, attracted to girls or women. And then in high school, I've always was authentically me. Like I wore flannel shirts, I wore the Levi jeans. I didn't change for anybody. Um, and so everybody kind of just assumed it in high school. Now, like I said, it was dysfunctional. I didn't realize until I was doing residential treatment with they call them sexually reactive individuals, those who have experienced SA, if you will, in their childhood and been exposed to it in circumstances, they become reactive to it and they have potential to be sexual abusers. So I worked with them, hoping to help, on their journey of healing. But during that, it was revealed to me, oh my goodness, I was sexually abused. I was 15. My basketball coach at the time would have been 21. And, at the time, I didn't think it was abnormal.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't until I started doing the counseling that I realized this. So that was the first part of it. But the reality is I had such a good relationship with my mom, though, despite being an alcoholic, that we talked about everything. She's always been our rock. She's always been the support for my brother and I. She always put us first. She's the true mother that everybody should have when it comes to taking care of and supporting their kids.
Mm.
Um, and I told her right away that I was attracted to my basketball coach. Well, that didn't go real well. And, at the time, I thought, oh no, I shouldn't have told her. But now I look back on it and she probably was thinking the same thing as me, like, this is just wrong. This relationship is not right. Right.
Hmm.
And maybe we just didn't talk about that thoroughly enough for me to understand that. So then what I did was I kind of hid a little bit then. I was like, oh no, that was just something I was going through. It's over. Don't worry about it. Um, and because she was drinking, that kind of, made her reactions a little bit different than I think she would have normally. She felt lied to and she felt betrayed because I hadn't told her, and actually just said, yes, this is me. So I think I was about 21 when she finally, I guess when she was drinking one night, she called me and she said, I know you're a lesbian, blah, 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 just kind of explaining things. And, she was angry at me, but she went through her counseling. She did what she needed to do to take care of herself. Um, Despite my dad blaming her for this is the stories that people tell all the time. It's somebody's fault that somebody's gay. No,
Right.
this is just who you are.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. So she went through her counseling and she got on the other side of that and has totally embraced um, my relationships to this day now. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, back then, even seeking out counseling and therapy was something that was forward thinking. And it's
yes.
amazing how, doing the work, you reap the results,
Mhm.
from either party. And um, your dad, I know fear, fear makes people react, and it was, I'm sure, fear based, and amazing, like I said, that you could get that time to spend with him at the end and kind of find some peace around that and see that he hadn't changed and maybe some compassion as well.
Mhm.
Um, but that's a lot, that's a lot to go through and to discover in your own therapy. Now you talked about was it treatment, or did you go to treatment, or were you at a treatment helping other people?
I was at a treatment facility helping other people. It was a residential treatment. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
And
a
so
counselor. Hmm.
so I know obviously you ended up, we talked earlier and I mentioned that you ended up in the life science industry.
Hmm.
But talk to us a little bit about your journey. Obviously, you've got a heart to help other people and support other people. You are one of my big supporters and encouragers, and are incredibly grounded spirit in my life that I just greatly appreciate. But your journey, just with that heart for service and ending up helping in a treatment facility. How did that transpire, and how long were you doing that for?
So it transpired. We had talked about this in the past, but hope is the crucial element that people need to be able to get through their journeys. That's what provides you with, I think it's the one thing that grounds you enough, like when you have that hope that you can persevere, that you have enough courage to take the next step, knowing that things are unknown, because everything is unknown until you try it, right? And so it started because I went through a breakup in a relationship, and I just was like, something's just missing all the time. And I remember growing up and people saying, "Oh, you should believe in God. God can help you through all this." And my response and my rebuttal was always, why would God let anybody go through any of this as a child? It's punishment. It's just not fair. So I didn't have a whole lot of hope when it came to like things could be better. I just felt like I was going to have to deal with life as it is, right? I didn't realize that once I had that hope that life could be so much better. And so as I was seeking this journey, I had friends that were going to a church called Metropolitan Community Churches. It predominantly is outreach for the LGBTQIA population, founded by Troy Perry, who was an Episcopalian priest who came out in his marriage to his wife, went through a lot of struggles and trials and tribulations, but he spread this church throughout the world, and has it authentically opened in like places like Jamaica, where like to be gay, you live in danger every day, right? So I found that in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, and started going to church, and my heart was open, the hope came, I started to believe. And what happened then was I had gotten laid off in the life sciences area. Our plant shut down, and I was like, wait, maybe being a pastor, maybe that's my path, helping people. I always
Yeah.
knew that I had a heart for that. And so I went to seminary, graduated and everything, but I had a crisis of faith in my last semester at seminary. And that crisis of faith was because of being educated in different world religions. And what I realized was I did not like the mentality of Christ is the only way. Because if I look at other world religions, other religions in the world, I find out that it's basically culturally specific with something that just is interwoven in each of them. Each of them have some sense of growth and transformation. You have a sense of hope, right? And when I saw that there was other religions that were very comparable and similar, I was like, wait a second here. Because if you get educated, you know that these are stories that are passed down, that it's history. Like history is not always captured, is captured accurately, I should say. It's captured through the eyes of the person who writes it. So I had a crisis of faith, and eventually I left the church. But that is where I found that hope. And during that time, I needed a job to be able to support myself. And I heard about this residential treatment facility and started out as a case manager and worked my way up to a therapist. Once I had my master's degree, I could do that to help people. I will tell you, though, that you have to be careful when you choose your occupations. My past trauma was very hard. We started getting more difficult individuals into our facility who basically in their outbursts sometimes would trigger my trauma.
Oh, wow.
And
Hmm.
so I had to leave that field because of that. As much as I wanted to help, I knew that that was not a safe place for me, and that they were triggers. I couldn't control those triggers. It was those loud noises and
Hmm.
and stuff like that that would trigger my PTSD at that time.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that
had to
makes.
leave it, and I went back into life sciences again.
Hmm. Just to have that experience, though, to go out and do some work like that is really powerful. When I was about 23, I got back from traveling in Hong Kong, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I was a bit of a wreck at the time, and I went to work for uh, a, um, Henshaw Society for the Blind, which is community housing for the blind. And my dad actually was, he worked there as well. He drove the bus because they would live in the community and then he would pick them up and they would go work in this art, where there was a cafe and an art school, and they would do a lot of art and sell it. And it gave them independence. But it truly was a time in my life where I felt like I was doing a real job. I had a real sense of giving back. And I think at that time too, it was powerful to give back because I had been such a taker. Um, and it really showed me my own ignorance as well. I think they helped me more than I helped them. So, but it was an incredible experience. But so, going through seminary and having that crisis of faith, you seem like the kind of person to me that just doesn't regret any of that, that it gave you kind of exactly what you needed at the right time, and you can take the gifts and just move on. And so with regards to, the triggers and the trauma that was happening during being in the treatment facility, what did you do to work on that? What tools did you end up kind of finding to work on the trauma and get to the bottom of some of that?
Yep. So obviously we cannot control any of our circumstances, right? Because that's the problem with the triggers for trauma. A lot of the control that I was able to do is in the support of my partnership with Amber. Um, to this day still, like if she turns on like the blender or knows there's going to be a loud noise that's made, she'll announce it. So the blender's going on and it's going to be some noise. So she does enough, like if you do enough to protect yourself in most circumstances, um then I think in those instances and when it happens, then you have the strength, I guess, to just kind of talk yourself through it. Because my reaction to those is I get very angry because I'm responding to, I'll just give you an example. I respond to being woken up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to fist fights, and physical violence of hearing my mom screaming like, don't do this, stop it, you're scaring me. And to be a child, though, you talked about like how we're not equipped, we're not ready, we don't emotionally, we're not prepared for it. But for some reason, I think I showed strength at a very young age because I think it was like third grade that I woke up one night when I heard this. And I went out and I confronted my father and looked at him and said, don't hit my mother again in third grade.
Oh, wow.
So, like, there's always been that sense of strength. Like, I don't even know why I would stand up to him, like, because of the fact that, like, this man obviously was hurting my mother. I saw the cuts and the bruises and stuff like that. Like, why would a child do that? I don't know. I just knew that it wasn't right what was going on. And from that day on, he never touched her again,
Oh,
which,
wow.
which
That's
was
really powerful.
that
Yeah.
is powerful. I
Yeah.
mean, the verbal abuse was still there, right? But the physical had stopped. Um, but yeah, so like just the coping skills are more of like self-talk, I think, more than anything. Trying to ground yourself in the reality. You have to tell yourself that this is not the past anymore, that I'm safe.
Mhm.
One of the tools is a very basic tool that people use a lot is just you talk about what do you see it right in front of you? What do you feel? What do you hear? What can you taste? What can you smell? Because it grounds you in reality of where you're at right now and doesn't take you back to that past situation. I think a lot of people look at healing as, oh, I'm going to get over it. I'm going to get completely through it. I don't know, honestly, and I'm not trying to deter anybody that you ever get completely through it. Like you 100% heal from it. You learn how to cope with it is what you do. You learn how to deal with it. You learn how to live with it, I guess I would say even thrive with it, right?
Mhm.
Because those very things are the things that give me the power to be as intuitive about my environment. I'm very in tune with everything that's going on. So there's that positive you're talking about, always finding the positive in it. It doesn't have to be the negative where it scares me, it takes me back to those moments, but it also has prepared me to, in my work today, I can read a room and like if we're having a meeting, like something's going on. So those are advantages
Mhm.
from being, in that past trauma. So.
Yeah, I can completely relate to you there that I can feel the energy in a room immediately. I gravitate towards anyone that I can feel is maybe not feeling a part of or feeling left
Mhm.
out in any way. Um, you know, as I've gotten sober and taken some time to sort of be with myself, you know, I've always thought I was kind of the social butterfly, which I don't know whether I would say I was a butterfly, but anyway, social. Um, and the older I get and the longer I have sober, the more I cherish one-on-one or one-on-three max time because I'm not just, I think because it's more intimate and I'm not distracted by, you know, whatever else, the hypervigilance of whatever else is going on in the room. So I can completely relate to that. And I love the reframing and finding the positive in it because it is a gift and it's finding how you can reframe, like you said, and use your powers for good, no matter how they came. I think
Mhm.
it's really transformative. I'm so glad you shared that. It's really important to be able to reframe. I know we've talked about this, but I'm going to do a little EMDR, and that I did when I've done it. I did it a few years ago, and I was kind of processing the time I had away from McLean when I was getting sober. But that worked. I mean, that took away, I don't know, it's very strange when I first heard about it and you know, this kind of tapping. Actually, at that time it was paddles and
Mhm.
and one would buzz and the other, and she kind of took me back and reframed the whole experience. Well, she gave me the space to reframe the whole experience. And I didn't have a lot of faith in it or even a lot of hope at that time because I was so overwhelmed by this grief.
Mhm.
But it worked.
Mhm.
I mean, it worked. Like you said, I can go there a little bit. The emotions still kind of, they're there. They're always going to be there. That experience happened, and I'm aware of that. But it took the edge off. It took the edge off, and I can talk about it now without bursting into tears, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah. And so I know that you made it into a 12-step program. And I'd love to, you know, I know you don't sort of partake in that anymore, but that was something that was kind of on your healing journey. What did you gain from that? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I was in high school and our varsity basketball coach, there was another player on the team that also had an alcoholic parent. Um, and our basketball coach would take us to these Al-Anon meetings, which was, I mean, the fact that she would do this, it was not the same coach that,
No.
I was in a relationship with. This was our
Yeah.
varsity coach. But she would take us to these meetings. Um, and the meetings for me, I would say Al-Anon brought hope. Like, no longer did I have to say it was God, it was a higher power. So I could, that language I was able to utilize and feel authentic to myself. But, there is something to be said about every time you talk about, when you're talking about alcoholism or abuse of any kind, like drug abuse or anything, there's always some sense of guilt, right? There's this shame, guilt. Of course, I didn't recognize as a child that I was going through those things, but yeah, we don't talk about it. My parents, we go out on Friday night to the Vigilant Social Club. And can I just say that I could see the positive in that, even though they were drinking and driving with me, they spent time with us every Friday night, right? And they didn't ignore us just because we were at the bar with their friends.
Hmm.
They would spend time playing games with us. We'd play music on the jukebox. We'd eat together. So it was family time. That was my family time, right?
Right.
But anyway, with that, comes, we were talking about hope. Now I forget where I was going to go with that.
The 12-step program and kind of
12-step
how
program.
and the
Yeah,
tool.
well, that's the other part of it, right? Like being able to see things from a different lens or perspective. It takes care of that shame and guilt where you
Mm,
start making amends to people. Like, because I still had amends because I've developed dysfunctional behavior. And so, I needed to work through all that. But I think when you're on a healing journey, sometimes if it's if it's not planned, if it's not sequential, I think that's what Al-Anon and AA brings. It's like this is the plan, but it's still enough that you can mold it to yourself,
mm,
right? Based
mhm,
on you. And I think that's what's important when you're on a healing journey. And to remember, it's not a destination, that it's truly a journey. You will
yeah.
keep peeling back the layers of the onion.
Yes.
You're getting to the center of it. I'm almost going on 60 now, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm at the center, I'm there. No, you're still revealing it. You're still
Yeah.
new ways to deal with things in life, but it's the structure, I think, of Al-Anon and AA that is so fabulous and helps people.
Yeah, I
Network of people, right? You have that
yeah,
support system, people that have made it through, so you know that you can do it too, because you see
ab
that success.
absolutely. That hope is there, and I love what you said about, like you're never the finished product because with this kind of latest, I was in a situation recently where I was triggered and all of a sudden I physically felt like I was back in this situation that I thought
Mhm.
I had processed. And I mean, I sweat, like I
Mhm.
just perspired and um, a visceral reaction. And I was like, afterwards, I was kind of had this bit of hard on myselfness. Like, come on now, mate, you're sober. Like, what is this about? And I actually then felt some anger towards the person that had, created this environment that took me there. But then after meeting with my therapist, it is, like you said, it's just another opportunity to go deeper.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's a double-edged sword, right? Because sometimes I just want to go on holiday or vacation. I just from it,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, my higher power. I'm like, I'm good now for a little while and just give me a bit of a break because and actually I get one. I do get one and I have a few months or I've even had a year or two where I've coasted and it's been great. But then if you've made that commitment and I think opened your heart to a life and a path of healing, it's going to come back, you're going to get that next layer. I mean, I could turn back and go and drink tomorrow, but all I'm going to do is prevent the inevitable, which is I'm going to come back to healing and then have to do the work again at some point or do more work. So luckily the desire to drink is has left me. So that's good. But I can get into other things like sugar.
No, understandable for sure. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Which actually brings me to your physical transformation. And I know like we talked a lot about that kind of, gaining and losing weight, just that piece of it, which there's a lot more to it. Um, but just that piece of it and that journey, um, another coping mechanism like you talked about, another maladaptive coping mechanism. It's like these feelings are too hard to process, and then on top of that I needed a feeling wheel to actually identify and verbalize and really identify how I felt and what I needed. And it was it was so hard to even feel like I deserved to ask for what I needed. And the byproduct of that was, binging and starving and binging and starving. So will you share with the listeners just a little bit about kind of that journey and today, there's been other transformation physically that you've been through. So I'd love you to kind of, I know that's a lot of kind of different pieces to it, but I'd love you to kind of go there if you're willing to share a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, weight loss and gain has been unfortunately a part of my journey from a very young age. And as I look back now, I mean, I know where it started. I don't know that I was aware enough at that point when I was younger about anything like as far as trying to hide from feelings of not being aligned with the physical gender that I knew I was. But my weight loss or weight gain and journey was more centered around um, my father being like, there was never a sense of satisfaction. Like I was either too heavy or was too skinny. There was never an in between. I don't remember once ever getting a positive compliment or anything like that that said, "Man, you look really good. I'm glad you're healthy and taking care of yourself." Right?
Man,
I
you
know
look
now.
really good. You look really healthy and you're taking care of yourself.
Thank you, Maddie. I feel really good. I
Yeah.
do. You probably could tell by just the way I carry myself now. I mean, some of the people that haven't seen me for a while will notice that probably just the happiness and joy that I have now. But with that, I never knew what was healthier. Like there was not a lot of good dietary habits taught to me as a young age. You know, I grew up in Pennsylvania Dutch country where it was meat and potatoes, dessert at every meal. So if you're not dealing with your emotions, which I wasn't, nobody ever taught me that. Maddie, I only thought there was one emotion. Well, two, sadness and anger. That's what I
Right.
thought were my two
Yeah.
emotions that I always had,
Yeah.
right? And well, of course, happiness. But you know, growing up, I never really identified those feelings. Well, you weren't allowed to, right? Like it doesn't matter what you feel. Like you've got to let everything else play out and you just sit behind the scenes and just kind of deal with things on your own. So the lack of dealing with emotions, I became an emotional eater. There was no doubt
Mm.
about it. Stress.
Mhm.
Anytime I'd feel stress, I needed to feel what food would do was calm me down. It was my coping skill. And then guess what? Then I felt really bad about myself because I was shamed and all those kind of things. And as I got older, I started to identify some of the feelings that would trigger my food, my, if you will, binge eating and stuff like that was more of like if I disappointed somebody.
Mhm.
I don't like disappointing people. I don't letting people down, any of that kind of stuff. So those are the reasons why I would eat. But anyway, so stress eating was a big part of that and up and down and up and down. One of the things that I realized though throughout that journey is some of that weight gain, I think I was hiding. I think I was hiding my true identity. Um, I got into a relationship in my freshman year of college, and when I did, I was fortunate enough once one of these situations where you say you're thankful for everything. I had a really good partner. I really didn't think that I would meet anybody again as sweet and just a good soul like this individual was in college until I met Amber, and then I was like, wait, it does come back around, and I was blessed again.
Now that's a
Um,
little hope for all of us there.
yeah, right. Um, I was in this relationship with somebody who had been exposed to the LGBTQI community because her mother was gay. So she grew up, you know, around, you know, surrounded by gay people, transgender, you know, drag shows, whatever. So she knew at that time, we're talking back in the, you know, 1980s, she knew a lot about transgender community. She said, Mill, I really think you're struggling with your gender identity. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was such a thing. Like I didn't have anything to put a name around it, right? And so she got me a bunch of books to read about. And so then that's when I really came out as, you know, knowing that my gender wasn't aligned with my birth gender, and that I needed to do something about it. However, you know, it took like what, 30 years later, 30 some years later to eventually make any changes. I had always lived more aligned with male gender, like dress and, you know, a haircut, everything pretty much. I always often say though, and it's one of the things that Amber kind of coined for me, if you will. She always used to just say, it's just my mill. Like, I don't really like, and I didn't know the language to define that. I didn't realize I was non-binary, that you could just be male or female, right? So that as I learned that language of non-binary, I was like, whoa, that really fits me. That aligns, that authentically feels really good inside when somebody says you're just male, because that's what I am. I like embracing my female side and I like embracing my male side. Physically, though, I embrace the looks of being male. And that's why I started the journey last year in March to start doing the testosterone to change some my physical appearance.
Mhm.
Um, and Maddie, I can't tell you that like looking in the mirror now, I don't avoid the mirror. I love looking in the mirror now and seeing authentically who I am. Before
Yeah.
I would avoid it. I didn't want to see myself naked. I didn't want any parts of what my body looked like at that point. And I know I'm not the extreme. You know, there's people out there that are so extreme on, you know, dysphoria when it comes to their bodies. This is a true thing, and people need to understand this. We're going through a really trying time right now where we're trying to discredit transgender people or gender differences of any kind. It's not even about transgender. You know, if you're not male or female, you don't fit into their paradigm, you know, and a lot of people, and there's so much hate surrounding it. If you only knew the joy and the happiness that somebody has, like I did when I looked in those mirrors, I shared my stories with you. You've been through this journey
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
you know, from day one. Um, and for some reason, Maddie, I don't know why, but I just shared with you, like, you're like, what's new? We hadn't talked for like
Yeah.
about a month or two. And you're like, what's new? I'm like, oh, well, I haven't told anybody else, but I'm going to tell Maddie. And I
I know.
did.
I
And you
love
were just
that.
so, you just graciously received that because you
Of
knew it.
course, of course.
I
Any
know.
human being that is happier or doing something to enhance their feeling of, well, their authenticity, not their feeling, but their authenticity, I'm just gonna, be excited for.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that was like, being authentic, that's the other piece of this. Like, if you're authentic, people they don't question you then. I think a lot of times if you're not like if you're like struggling with it too, other people struggle with it. And I'm not saying that you can't people are going to go through that. Not everybody's going to be like me and be like, "Okay, I just this is who I am. If you don't like it, you're out of my life." I didn't have to worry about that because everybody in my life was going to support me. I knew that. Um, but anyway, I mean I have a strong foundation of support and love and all that as we go through some of these trying times. But one of the things that used to happen, and I know this is how dysfunctional thinking can get. Your brain is so complex in the way it tries to help you deal with things. I actually thought that if I gained weight, that I would hide my chest because I never called my chest my breast. That should have given me an indication of something, right? I always said chest. It was like you were hiding your chest behind the fat, but it was worse. It didn't make
Right.
sense. I would look in the mirror and I was just doubly disappointed because not only did I, still have that chest, I had now weight that was on top of it because I always felt better when I
Mm-hmm.
was more muscular and trim and stuff and fit and healthy. Knowing now is because I probably, had more of a male physique. And that's why I liked it more. But anyway, that's a part of the weight loss and gain. Now, for the past year, I've lost about 60 pounds.
That's
Uh,
amazing. It's
and
an
it was
amazing weight
yeah,
loss.
and it makes it a pretty easy journey when you're authentically who you are.
Yes.
And I don't struggle near as much. Like I now feel like I have a touch like with being able to identify those emotions more now. And so when I feel like I want to eat for no reason, I'm not really hungry, then I will look at the emotions I'm dealing with. But I got to tell you, Maddie, it's another layer sticking out there
I
because
is.
there's another part of me that wants to gain some more muscle, right? But that means you have to gain weight. And what does that do? That triggers that whole past of the trauma of like weight gain, like I'm going to get fat, the poor self-image and stuff. So you still deal with it, but just on a different level. There's a new dimension to the healing process for me now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I've seen the transformation, the physical transformation, but what is most wonderful is your spirit is just, is so much stronger. You speak, you always were incredibly grounded and dynamic in many ways. Um, but it's just been turned up. It's
I
just
would
been,
agree. I understand what you're saying with
you
that.
know,
There's a level of confidence that wasn't
yeah,
there.
yes.
Because I was always worried, I mean, if the people walk down this road, I mean, you hear stories about it, but I would never go into a restroom. I hated going into the restroom without Amber. I wanted somebody with me because if I was talking to Amber when I went in there, then I probably wouldn't be confronted. If I went in by myself, I always got confronted. You're in the wrong restroom, those kind of things all the time. So, that, and if you're at a restaurant, and I have a baseball hat on and I'm turned to the side, people would I felt guilty because I knew authentically inside of me I was male, right? Like I
Mhm.
knew because I say that I'm non-binary transmasc, right? And so I knew inside that masculine side of me wanted to be noticed, but then when it was noticed and I really wasn't authentically male, if you will, at that point for me,
Mhm.
then I'd be feeling guilty about it because somebody called me that, even though it felt good, it was a strange experience. But the best part of it now is the struggle now is teaching people to use the right pronouns.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can tell somebody's intentions with that. And there's grace for those that, still get into grips with it. But yeah, you can tell with someone's intentions, I
Mhm,
think, um, whatever they say in whatever capacity, actually, it's like the difference between, somebody that loves you and a good friend giving you feedback and then somebody who's toxic as, what,
mhm.
wanting to give you feedback. And you're like,
Yeah.
hang on a minute, that feels horrendous and
Yes.
get away from me.
Yeah, no. Yep.
So, um, Now, so what's you've been through so much. I know you're more or less healed physically, and you're wanting to like gain more muscle, and that's all the physical stuff. But so what have you got planned for this year? And we're going, spring is tomorrow. Is spring tomorrow? Daylight savings, or we're springing forward? That's all I really remember. But what have you got planned for this year, sort of on your new goal list? I know that you feel life has opened up, and you sent me a little list a while ago. So would you share a little of that?
Yeah, what I wanted to do is get back into, I'm a dreamer. I'm very much I like to set goals and I set high standards for myself. Which can be a problem because you tend to do that to everybody that's in your life and not everybody's equipped that way, right? I have this, we joke about it and it's my one of my next tattoos, but we joke about it like Amber says it's Mill's switch. Like not everybody functions like I do, and that is if I get my mind set on something, that switch goes on and I'm doing it, right? Because that's just who I am.
And you're
Uh,
doing it and you're completing it.
yes, yes,
You know,
exactly.
that's a big deal right there.
Right, exactly. So one of the things that I had lost over those couple of years when I was struggling so much, a lot of it brought on by stress of a job, being very toxic in the environment. But now that I'm in a safe environment, they have totally embraced me with my change. I didn't come out and just tell everybody that I'd made any changes. They just embraced it. I told my boss and I told some other people in leadership here, but I just went through the journey and said, you know what, if they are curious enough to ask the question and they care enough, they'll ask. I don't need to broadcast it. I don't come in and, you don't tell everybody everything about your life. They're going
No.
to miss it, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, that one of my big goals this year is just to be trained to move to the next level of leadership as a director level, which I'm going to have the opportunity of getting some of that training this year at work. So I'm looking forward to that and gaining the skill set that I need to advance to the next level. And then the other pieces of this is a physical challenge for myself. I've had 2 knee replacements. And I know if there's any orthopedic doctors out there, please don't listen as you hear this. But I really want to finish a marathon, Maddie. I've done a half marathon, and I know that it could potentially be damaging if I run on those knees. So my next step is to reach out to somebody who's just a good PT in the industry that maybe can help me cross train and I won't
Mm.
have to run as much, but maybe do other activities to get me fit enough to be able to finish a marathon. Because I'm not going to try to break any record and set any times, but
No,
I can't
just to
guarantee
complete
anything.
it. Yeah, just to
I can't
complete it.
guarantee anything, Maddie. When I'm in the middle of the training, it might switch. So we might have a
Yeah,
different story to tell.
that doesn't
Um,
surprise me at all. Amber will have to keep an eye on you.
yeah. One of the things that I've not done, that I've always wanted to do is just write a book of experiences, like, and to start putting pen to paper, and talking about some of that experience. I'm not sure what that looks like right now because there's been a couple things that I've wanted to write about. One was my crisis of faith. The title of the book, which might be offensive to some people, was How Seminary Killed My Jesus. And people were offended by
That's
that
a
when I
really
brought that
powerful
up, but
title.
it happened.
Yeah, that's a really powerful title. And I think, your book is an expression, and if it's the truth is the truth, the truth. It's your truth.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what about your other book?
Oh, the other book, that's just
Do you
more
have a
about my life.
title for that?
I don't have a title of that yet, like for the transgender journey, if you will. Um, because what I want to do is there's so many books out there, like when I was looking for resources and stuff, there's so many things out there about like, oh, this physical change is going to happen. You can anticipate this happening for testosterone. Your appetite's going to increase, all these different things that are going to change for you. Of course, that's the male experience, the female to male experience. But nobody talks about the emotional things behind that as much, right? Um, and perhaps I feel like so many people struggle, but where's the journey of the people that do not struggle that can share that story? Like maybe make a difference with sharing your story being a positive experience. Mine was not negative. Maybe that's what the world needs. Maybe they need more of that.
I
Um,
love that. Absolutely, they do.
yeah. And you had asked me in the past, where do I see myself like as far as, you know, in this journey and what to do in the world now, I have realized that I am not the person to go out there. Like, would I go out there and do some public speaking? Yes. But I want an audience that I can motivate and empower to do different. Those one-on-one relationships are where you make the difference. I don't think going out and doing public speaking is going to be effective because I haven't developed that relationship with somebody. Now, you can be dynamic and still connect with your audience, right? That can happen. But my greater chance of making a difference in this world, and it seems like it's going to go slower, but I don't care because I'd rather turn one person's mind than speak to 100 people and not reach anybody, right? So mine's more about focused on those daily relationships that I build and having those difficult conversations. I had the same, conversation with somebody in seminary, and I shared this story with you before. Um, the person was from Jamaica, was in the UCC church, totally did not like, would not been somebody truly represented Christ, but did not believe that being a gay was okay because of growing up in Jamaica, that influence of the cultures there.
Mhm.
We always prayed before every class. And when I prayed, she said to me afterwards, she said, I had to say to myself that there can't be anything wrong with this. God would not let somebody pray like that if being gay was not okay. And it changed
Absolutely.
her mind. She's a huge advocate and she's high up in the UCC now, right? So those are the kind of relationships that I look to be to impact in my life and not necessarily reach. If I reach a large number of people, that's great. Maybe this podcast can do that too for us. I don't,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know,
Yes, I hope so.
um, you just never know. Like, I don't know about your journey, but I know a lot of people come back later and they say, oh, that moment that you did that was transformative for me. But people don't share that because guess what, Maddie? It makes you vulnerable. If
Hmm.
I if I acknowledge you and I acknowledge something that happened, it makes me vulnerable that I don't have that, right?
Hmm.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people won't give those compliments or they don't, people look at me like I'm weird, like because I'm like, do you know how powerful that was? Like I get all excited and I share that with somebody. Not everybody's willing to do that.
Not
But
everyone's
we need to
willing
do
to go
more of
there.
it because
Mm.
it's powerful when somebody changes and impacts your life like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's, I said, and it's so cliche, but I did say it. If, just one person listens and they have a moment where they don't feel alone or they hear some, experience strength and hope, then it's enough because this really is, a hobby and just something that was on my heart to do. And why not? And I've had to let go of perfectionism and it's been like um, its own learning and lesson giving experience. It's been really incredible that everybody said yes. I haven't had anybody say no. So I'm like, all right, well, so when I pray to my higher power, I'm like, just if it's not meant to be, just take it away from me, and then I'll think, oh, I'll ask this person, and then I think they're going to say no, and then they say yes, and I'm like, oh, well, someone must need to hear them, someone must need to hear them. And I recently had a chap on who is he does speaking on stage and does some coaching, a lot of coaching and things like that. But he's been a really big encourager and he's helping me. He reached out the other day, this morning actually, because I sent him a gratitude list and he said because I'd put that I'm trying to get better at editing this thing. And anyway, so he's booked a call and he's going to give me some of his valuable time just to take me through a new editing program. And if it's meant to be, whoever is meant to be put in your path or hear something, I think if it's on your heart to put it out there or to share your vulnerability with somebody, there is that inner guidance, regardless of your belief system. There is that inner guidance. And sometimes it's just having the courage to go, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose. I've got nothing to lose. But you did say you're willing to speak on stage. You are willing to speak to, if that was where you were asked. So anyone listening that is looking for somebody that's had an amazing and positive experience with this side of transformation and also a story of resilience and grace and love growing up. And yeah, your story is incredible, Mill. I'm so grateful you said yes and that we got to spend this special time today together. So before we wrap up, it is about that time. But before we wrap up, I think you're mostly on TikTok, are you? And I think you said you might do a little bit more on social media, but if people wanted to follow you, is that where they would go?
Milster 36 is my Milster 36 is my TikTok and my Facebook. But
Perfect.
I'm also listed under Hegi-Miller on Facebook as well. Those are my two places that I go the most right now. I'm not really active on TikTok as far as like posting anything, but that is something I'm contemplating and whether or not I want to share my story. The reality of it is, and you know this, um, do you have the mental capability, I guess, is my question for myself, to resist that criticism for me because
Yeah.
it's so much out there. And I know it doesn't matter if it's like if it's truly authentic, if it's people just trying to, or if it's the bots that are doing it or whatever, it still is a trigger for some people still. And so I'm contemplating like how will that impact my life and would it be too much for me to deal with at this point? But I think I've come far enough that I might be able to, handle that a little better than what I would have in the past. But there is that side of it that can be challenging. I just wish the world was a little bit nicer place to be. Um,
Yeah.
and not so cruel and critical of people. It's unfortunate that our world has become this, but I try to focus on all the positive because I'm surrounded by it. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And you're putting a confident, positive message out there, and a thick skin is good, but I just decided I wasn't going to read anything that anyone thinks. I was
good thing.
just
Maybe
gonna,
you could hire somebody else to do that for
yeah,
you.
just post and then just turn off and don't even look how many views you've got, which I think I don't know, just post and release, post and release. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please tell Amber, that I send my love and I hope that you guys just enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I know we'll probably connect. Well, I'll probably give you a call after this. But thanks, Mill, and thanks for being an incredible friend, having a positive and strong message. And it's great to see you thriving and glowing. And I just love you lots.
Thank you, Maddie. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Mill.
Here.
All right, talk to you soon.
Yep.
Bye. Bye.